Great War was to be the war to end all wars. Born of hatred, greed, and ambition, it would prove to be the most deadly war the world had ever known, and yet it would prove nothing. This was a war of attrition, a race to beat the enemy technologically and therefore militarily. The advent of trench warfare was to be a direct result of this new age of precision and industrialization. Soldiers exposed to murderous artillery and machine gun fire had little chance of survival, and as such, soldiers were ordered to dig in. This temporary measure would soon become the norm. Lice, rats, corpses, and death surrounded the entrenched men daily. Miles deep and fortified within barbed wire, mines, and machine gun nests, the trenches were nearly impenetrable. They were a vision of hell on earth. In between the trenches lay no man's land, a moonscape of mud and blood, dead and dying soldiers and horses, many of which died in agony, hopelessly entangled in barbed wire, isolated from help. These men and animals slowly died, unable to free themselves, many times being totally exposed to snipers, enemy fire, and artillery barrages. Barbed wire was to play a pivotal role in trench warfare. Invented in the previous century for ranging purposes, it found new use in the defensive tactics of trench warfare. Though used in some previous conflicts, it was prolific on all fronts of the war. Famously impenetrable, barbed wire was used not only to defend the trenches, but also to rout enemy attackers to choke points, where waiting machine guns would pour fire into the advancing soldiers, who were in turn slaughtered. This would be a bloody scene to be repeated over and over as men went over the top and launched suicidal raids on enemy positions. Most would not make it back. Hiram Maxim's invention of the machine gun would serve a pivotal role for all sides in this new type of warfare. Capable of firing 600 rounds a minute, the machine gun was a formidable weapon and could equal the firepower of many soldiers equipped with bolt-action rifles. This made frontal assaults on enemy trenches a near certain death sentence. Placed many miles behind the deepest trenches, artillery was deadly accurate. Complex trigonometric calculations were used in order to drop shells directly into enemy positions. Breech-loading, rifled artillery, equipped with the latest recoil-absorbing devices, enabled gunners to be more accurate than ever before. This meant the artillery piece could be fired rapidly without repositioning. This was to lead to the advent of the creeping artillery barrage. This was in essence walking an artillery barrage in a wave ahead of advancing friendly troops in order to suppress enemy rifle and machine gun fire, thus enabling the attacking troops to get closer to enemy positions before coming under murderous fire. Artillery bombardment was to become the standard precursor to an impending attack in order to soften up enemy positions, though many times the enemy would simply bunker down until the barrage was over. First fielded by the British, the tank was designed to break the stalemate of trench warfare. Lacking in suspension, ventilation, adequate armor, and prone to getting mired in the mud, the tank was anything but a miracle weapon, though it did have great potential when used in the right circumstances. Terrified German troops initially had nothing to counter the British tanks. As the British threat became clear, German leaders came to realize a tank of their own was needed, and the A-7V soon entered the battlefield. Clumsy, high-centered, and prone to getting stuck and tipping over, the A-7V was a poor answer to the British lozenge tanks. Shortly after the first tank-on-tank engagement, the A-7V was taken out of action. The Germans would rely instead upon captured British tanks rebranded with German insignia. World War I was to make the elite cavalry units obsolete. Barbed wire machine guns, mines, and scores of soldiers equipped with the latest bolt-action rifles would prove decimating for cavalry equipped with medieval-type lances and rifles, which required dismounting or stopping to fire. Though cavalry units did have some limited successes, their deployment as a whole proved an utter failure in the face of modern technology. Horses were easily entangled in barbed wire and were not able to cross many of the trenches. This would strip the cavalry of one of their most effective weapons, speed, and leave them virtually defenseless. The submarine was the deadly scourge of the seas, lurking in the deep, ready to strike at any moment. Germany's masterful use of the submarine would very nearly starve Great Britain into submission. As the war intensified, Germany became increasingly desperate to break the naval blockade imposed by the British. As such, Germany was to focus on sinking British merchant ships in order to cut off vital supplies to the island nation. As a war of attrition intensified, Germany's politicians became desperate to force Britain into submission. This decision would lead to unrestricted submarine warfare and the infamous sinking of the Lusitania. This incident would play a pivotal role in America's entrance into the war and Germany's ultimate defeat. Initially very successful, the submarine would eventually fall prey to increased firepower of British and American ships, spotter planes, and convoys. Germany's gamble had backfired. The reduced number of ships being sunk meant that the German blockade of Britain would be unsuccessful and spelled doom for a war-weary Germany. The end of World War I would redraw the map of Europe. Germany would lose much land and be imposed upon to pay war reparations. These Germany could never hope to repay. Vengeful nations seeking to punish and weaken the aggressor nations would set the stage for the next World War. Though many of the provisions of the Treaty of Versailles would stand the test of time, the harsh punishment and demands upon Germany would push her to the breaking point. The violation of the Treaty of Versailles and Germany's rearmament were inevitable, predictable, and ultimately tragic.